We are 68 days in counting until the kickoff of the 2025 Texas football season against Ohio State in Columbus, and I am now back and I have returned from my week getaway in Hilton Head, South Carolina, which was fantastic. My week vacation. We are back for another episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, as we find ourselves here on June 23rd on a Monday evening, right smack dab in the middle of growing momentum on the Burnt Orange Trail with Texas football recruiting, as the third and final official visit weekend for Texas just wrapped up, and Texas picked up two more big time commitments, both on the defensive side of the ball, that we will continue to talk about throughout this episode. We've got to talk about the quarterback in this class, Diabell, who put on an incredible performance at the Elite 11 this past week and won the MVP. And we've also got to talk about some of the other intel that's come out of the past couple weekends while I have been out of town of official visits, where Texas has hosted the bulk of the super blue chip targets that they are recruiting. On the back half of today's show, we are going to jump into some off-season talk related to the Texas baseball program. We'll give some quick thoughts on how the season ended, as we really haven't touched on that since it happened a couple weeks ago, and we'll start to introduce some of the players that Texas is bringing in through the transfer portal and how they fit in to kind of what their needs are this offseason. And that will be the basis of today's show. It should be a great episode, and I'm super excited to get into everything, especially what's going on and what's happening behind the scenes with Steve Sarkisian and company on the 2026 recruiting front. But with all that being said, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. We just put out, I think it was earlier today, our last episode of Make Your Case, which we recorded before I left, but it just was released. It'll count for our NFL content for this week, but we'll really be diving into NFL preview stuff and training camp stuff and all of that starting next week in the month of July. With all that being said, I welcome in my co-host, Mr. Emmy Nixon. What's
Nothing
up,
much.
man?
You mentioned the Elite 11 finals. It pops in your head just how decorated that list of Elite 11 MVP finalists are over the last 15 years or so. It's been a bunch of number one overall draft pick type of guys. So if Diabell is on that track, then we are in a very good spot as Longhorns fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we should start, I think, today's conversation. Before he took his official visit to Texas this weekend, um, Diabell was participating in the 2025 Elite 11 finals, where the best quarterbacks of that recruiting class, of that year's recruiting class, are showcased. Um, and boy, did he impress. If he wasn't already going to be a consensus 5-star in this class, I think he solidified that with his performance over a couple days at this Elite 11 finals. And Emmy mentioned it. Um, he's the first ever Texas quarterback commit to have been named MVP of the Elite 11 finals. But he joins notable past winners: Matthew Stafford, Jameis Winston, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud. Matthew Stafford's won a Super Bowl. Jameis Winston is made a career out of being a starter slash really good backup, one of the top backups in the league. Tua Tagovailoa is a starter for the Miami Dolphins. Justin Fields has landed another starting job for the New York Jets. C.J. Stroud is a star quarterback for the Houston Texans. There's a really good track record here, as Emmy alluded to, of Elite 11 MVPs not only being stars at the college level, but going on to be number one draft picks, going on to do really special things in the NFL. And Emmy, while you were out, I was just saying, he's the first ever Texas commit at quarterback to win Elite 11 Finals MVP. And the track record of guys that have won MVP at this particular showcase for quarterbacks in their recruiting class are Matthew Stafford, Jameis Winston, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, and C.J. Stroud. That's a pretty decorated list. And if you look at the past 5 MVPs of the event, you're looking at a guy like Cade Klubnik, who everyone thinks, barring some type of devastating injury or horrible season, is going to be a top 10 pick next year, most likely. Maybe even a top 5 pick next year. You think about Caleb Williams, who was obviously the number 1 pick in the draft. And then you have some younger guys who still have lots of potential, some of which we haven't even seen play yet. That includes the like of Keelan Russell, who's a freshman at Alabama and was the top quarterback in last year's class when it was all said and done. So I think with this performance by Diabell, he solidified himself as a consensus 5-star across all 4 recruiting services. I think Texas got themselves possibly the best quarterback in this entire recruiting class. He's just so smooth and polished. Doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. You see that on film. He can make all the throws you need him to make. And this just got me even more excited for Diabell, who's got professional athlete pedigree running through his blood, if you believe in that kind of stuff, with his father, of course, who played in the NBA and was an all-star. And, you know, his brother is being recruited at the D1 level to play basketball. I mean, it's a really athletic family. And he's just so mature beyond his years. And this is really exciting as he's now kind of he's going to act as the bell cow of this entire recruiting class. He's the guy now that this past weekend on campus, when he took his official visit, knowing that he's going to end up at Texas, knowing that he hasn't wavered since he made that commitment last summer, knowing that he wants to play for Sark, that this is home, that he wants to build something special after Arch Manning potentially leaves for the NFL draft, whether that's next year or the year after. He's the guy who played a big part, I think, in the commitments that have happened over the past couple of weeks, including the big one that happened yesterday, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So this can only get you excited about what he was able to accomplish. But after each day of the Elite 11, just to give you some context, each quarterback is ranked by Elite 11 staff, the coaches that are on site, and 24/7 Sports national scouting team, who's also there. And that's how they decided that Bell was number 1 and he won the MVP. So I expect, not every service has him as a 5-star right now, but I expect when we get to signing day, he will be a consensus top 10 national prospect, and he'll be a consensus unanimous 5-star. What are your thoughts on Diabell and the Elite 11
to
performance
extend the point you made earlier about him being the son of an athlete, like, it's not even whether you believe in it. It's been proven at this point that if you are I won't even say son, I'll say child of an athlete, you have those professional athlete habits baked into you from an extremely young age, because those are the people that know what it takes to succeed in a sport at an extremely high level. And there's a constant formula to that. It's not a secret to these guys. So for Diabell, I think to have that in his back pocket, to have his dad in his corner telling him, what habits to implement, what health tips you want to have, what workouts you want to do, those types of things. I mean, I think it's huge.
Yeah, this is what 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst Andrew Ivins wrote about Diabell's performance in day 3 of the 7-on-7 segment that they ran. Quote, surgical performance for Bell in his 7-on-7 game. He started 10 of 11 with 3 touchdowns and a drop. Cool, calm, collected. Bell sees the field at an advanced level and works through his progression, looking off defenders. Owns smooth mechanics that might be the best in this class. Not afraid to take what a defense is giving him. Ball of the game for him was a dart to the post for a 35-yard touchdown, which if you just type in Diabell on your X feed, that play will come up. He was just absolutely just smooth, cool, calm, collected, and incredible this weekend. And the significance of this is Texas, it just further legitimate, cements his status as being not only maybe the best quarterback in this class, but a consensus unanimous 5-star when it's all said and done. And when you look at the history of Texas quarterback recruiting, he could actually end up being one of the highest rated Texas quarterback recruits to ever commit. And Texas has a history of getting some really, really elite talent at that position. I mean, Vince Young is the first guy that comes to mind, right? And then you think about a guy like Quinn Ewers, and we can talk all we want about how that actually ended up, but he was rated that way coming out of high school. And then, of course, Arch Manning. And even a guy like Chance Mock was rated super highly coming out of high school. So,
yeah,
you think about Chris Sims, underrated. That was a big deal. So he's putting himself in definitely that kind of conversation. Let's just leave it at this, and then we'll move on. He put his name into or with in the context of guys like C.J. Stroud, Caleb Williams, Jameis Winston, Matthew Stafford. I mean, just leave it at that, and that's all you need to know. Now, here's the one caveat. It is still shorts and T-shirts, not throwing in pads. He's not getting hit. But we've already seen that part on film, and I think we're going to continue to see him progress throughout his senior season. But the fact that Texas has him in this recruiting class and he's turned into this phenom, it's incredible because he's going to continue to come back to campus when he can make it. He has that, I guess, privilege given his father and his family and his background. Not everybody can take as many trips to Texas from Florida as a guy like Diabell can because of his, family background. And he'll continue to be a big part of Texas building this class, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Like, I feel like we're going to get into this now. The coaching staff and whatever Texas is doing on defense, just keep doing it because they might be doing it better than anybody right now in America on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, though, Diabell is going to be a big part in, say, a John Turntine or a Felix Ojo or some of these other guys that are in the class that Texas wants.
Crowell at running back as well.
So with that, we'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And not everything's, rainbows and roses here. Because, and I guess we could, if we have enough time, we'll talk about this a little bit in our Intel segment. But KJ Edwards took a visit to A&M, and right after that, actually committed to A&M before his Texas visit. So Texas did lose that recruitment, at least for now. And now they're kind of left scrambling at running back, which isn't great. But as we've seen with this staff, and this is what I'll say about it, they'll find someone at running back. I'm pretty confident about that. Whether it's Crowell or a guy like Derek Cooper, who I think they have a good chance with, or somebody else that we don't even know right now. I mean, hell, they came out of nowhere last year, and they got Justice Terry. And nobody before the month of November was even talking about Texas in the running with Justice Terry. And little did they know, Texas was making progress behind the scenes and all that. So we're not here to really dive into that right now, but let's get into these commitments from over the weekend. And I think it's appropriate that we start with the big one. A guy that we haven't really talked about, needed to talk about on this podcast, but Texas has been recruiting because he actually committed to Oregon. And his name is Richard Wesley. I think they call him Richie Wesley. He's a 5-star edge prospect, a consensus super blue chip. I think 2 of the services have him as a 5-star, Rivals and ESPN. And both On3 and 24/7 have him as a high 4-star. Top 50 player in the country is what this guy is. He's actually rated the number 6 overall national prospect by Rivals. He is thought to be a consensus super blue chip, and I consider him to be a consensus 5-star because he's rated as a 5-star by at least 2 of the 4 recruiting services. I'll say this. I'm not surprised that Richie Wesley, or Richard Wesley, whatever you want to call him, I'm not surprised that he necessarily ended up at Texas. I'm not surprised that he committed to Texas. But I'm surprised about 2 things. Number 1 is, I'm surprised when it happened. Like the fact that he committed coming out of his visit yesterday, on Sunday, the 22nd, this fast. I'm a little surprised it happened yesterday so quickly. But good on the Texas staff, I guess. And then number 2 is, I'm surprised. I was very, very taken aback by his quotes when he was interviewed post-commitment. When he basically said, "This is it, man." I'm paraphrasing. But he said, "My recruitment is 100%, 1,000% shut down. I'm coming to Texas in January. I'm early enrolling at Texas in January." I was very surprised that
and
he
I can
would
confirm
come
that
out
that's the official
and
quote,
say
too.
that.
I have that in front of me.
But it was also... Yep, that's what he said. And he said it again today at the Rivals 5-star when he was interviewed by Adam Gorney. Little 2-minute interview on Twitter. You can go watch it. I gotta say, man, I already love this kid. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. 5-star edge prospect, out of state. How does he compare to Colin Simmons? Well, here's what I'll tell you. They're 2 totally, they're polar opposites. Colin Simmons was 6'3", 220, 225 coming out of high school. He was a bit of a tweener for his position, but what Colin Simmons has that makes him special, although he didn't really have the ideal build coming out of high school, although he was a bit of a tweener, is he has a special ball get off and special athletic physical traits otherwise that allow him to be the best of the best getting to the quarterback in high school and now, as we've seen, to start his career at Texas. Richard Wesley is not that. He's 6'5", 6'6", 255, 260. He's totally
No.
He's not a tweener. He's far from a tweener. It's no offense to Colin Simmons. What he does at his size is special, and he's already put on muscle. He's already probably up to 240, 245, 250 now through the strength and conditioning program at Texas. But Richard Wesley is a different player. But they're both great at what they do, and that's get after the passer. Go watch this guy's film. He's relentless. He's pretty polished coming off the edge. He just absolutely destroyed competition. In his first 2 years of high school,
Sierra Canyon, yeah,
out in California, at Sierra Canyon. And I think what we're learning with this Texas staff, given what they've done over the past couple of weeks in recruiting, is that it's not a great year on the defensive line and at the edge position in the state of Texas. So what does Texas do? They're going out of state. And they're I think, in fact, they've become maybe even better at recruiting out of state than in state. they're going to find elite talent wherever they can find elite talent. But what people are telling you when they rank, what ESPN and what Rivals as of now are telling you, ranking him as a 5-star, is that they believe this guy projects as a eventual first-round draft pick. And most of the time, not all the time, players get hurt. They can get in trouble with the law. Things can go awry. Anything can happen. It's happened before. But if they keep their head on straight, most of the time players like Richard Wesley end up being drafted. And a good amount of those players that get drafted end up being first-round picks if they really, really hit. And that's the importance of getting super blue chips, is they have a much higher chance of panning out as NFL players. The math backs it up. But it's kind of a dopamine hit, and then I'll pass it to you for Texas fans, because he was a guy that I thought Texas had a chance with, but after he committed to Oregon at the start of May, and there's a now viral video of him jumping into a pool with Dan Lanning to announce his commitment. He stayed committed to Oregon for 17 days, and then he decommitted. And then he visits Texas, and boom, voila, he's committed to Texas. I think that Oregon commitment was premature. I think he realized that. I think he learned his lesson. He wanted to take some more visits. But the biggest thing is, number one, they get a super blue chip edge rusher, and they might be on the verge of getting another one here next week with Jamarian Carlton, as I think they're the leader with him. He's an in-state guy. They get a super blue chip in the class. That's very important. It's at a premium position. He's really, really fucking good. Excuse my French. And I think the biggest thing, if you're a Texas fan, is, again, you never know with these out-of-state recruitments. A program like Ohio State, for example, could come in November, December with a large NIL offer, and that could change things. This could still end up going the distance. But if you were Steve Sarkisian, and in his exit meeting yesterday, after his, about to leave from his official visit, he tells you that he's going to commit to Texas. Well, first of all, you're pretty fucking excited, right? But if you're Steve Sarkisian and I were to give you truth serum, what would be the first thing you would want Richard Wesley to say to the media in his interview when he's first interviewed by reporters about his commitment? What's the one thing you would want Richard Wesley to say when he was?
You would want him to say exactly what he said, which is the recruitment is 100%, 1,000% done, and they're taking no more visits. The thing that I'll say on Wesley real quick is, you mentioned he's a different player than Simmons. Like, Simmons is more Abdul Carter, and I would say Wesley has some Aiden Hutchinson, Nick Bosa to his game. Like, it's a more power-focused, more holding the edge, run defense. Kind of think of a Baron Sorrell type with a little bit more explosive pop.
Yeah, I actually like that. I actually really like that comparison. He is, to give you guys a little more context, and that's exactly right. Like, you want him to say exactly what he said, and what he said multiple times since committing, is that I'm shutting it down, this is it, I'm not even going to take... He was actually scheduled to make an official visit to Ohio State in the fall for the Ohio State-Texas game as a guest of Ohio State. I don't think coming into the weekend that he was planning on making a commitment. But Texas did a good job of locking it down. So good on them. But he's a super blue chip. Those guys pan out at much higher rates into the NFL and as first-round draft picks than just regular old 3 or 4 stars. And the best of all, if you're a Texas fan, is like, I don't think you're going to have to worry too much about this kid over the next couple months. about him taking other visits or about him decommitting based on what he said to the media. And he seems like a guy that after learning his lesson with his premature commitment to Oregon, he's going to stick with this one. If this were his first commitment, I'd be a little more worried. But since he's already decommitted from somewhere else, I'm a little more sure.
Right, and the fact that he mentioned the business school as well.
And the other important thing to note before you can finish us off and we move on to some of the other intel is this guy actually was supposed to be part of the 2027 class. He's a year younger for his class. He actually reclassified earlier this spring to the 2026 class. And so the fact that he's rated as highly as he is, as a guy who's a year younger than most of these other guys in this recruiting class, he'll be going into his junior year this year instead of his senior year. It's interesting because I think he's going to be a guy that comes in the spring next year, goes into fall camp, probably puts on some weight, might be ready to contribute right away, but I think he's a guy that will be allowed the opportunity since he has that extra year, since he'll be entering college as technically a senior in high school, or supposed to be a senior in high school because he's a year early. He'll be a guy that even though he's a 5-star, can sit behind Colin Simmons and Lance Jackson and all these other elite players that Texas has recruited at his position, continue to further develop his body since he is a year early, and he'll be the guy that I think, along with maybe another edge that Texas gets in this class here very soon, can step in 2027 when Colin Simmons leaves for the NFL draft. That's kind of what I envision right now as the plan for Richard Wesley. Maybe he doesn't make an immediate contribution year one, but I think it's going to work out perfectly timeline-wise because he can step in right away, and I think he'll be ready to step in right away, right after Colin Simmons leaves. Like, the timelines match up perfectly. So, that's Richard Wesley. We'll continue to talk about him, but I wanted to get into some of the other intel here so we can wrap this segment up and move on to baseball.
Yeah, let's do it.
Does that sound good to you, Emmy? All right. Where do you want to start? Is there a particular player that visited this past weekend that you're most interested in knowing about? It can be a guy that's committed or a guy that's uncommitted. Was there a guy on this list outside of Richard Wesley that you wanted to talk about? Or do you want me to just kick us off? Going somewhere random.
Let's talk about Vodney Cleveland. He just committed, a 4-star defensive lineman. Let's talk about him a little bit because there's a discussion about him and also about Kenny Baker and his ability to recruit.
Yeah, let's do that. He was actually the guy who committed. He's from Birmingham, Alabama. He's largely considered to be a top 10, 15-ish defensive lineman in this class. If you watch his film, he's a guy that's... What do you want in your defensive lineman in the SEC? You want him to be mean and violent off the line of scrimmage, and that's exactly what Vodney Cleveland is. Despite the commitments that Texas already had on the defensive line with Dylan Berryman from Louisiana and Corey Wells from Mississippi, two very good prospects, I think Vodney Cleveland is a better, more polished prospect at this point in time than those two guys, slightly. He's a very good player. And his commitment is big because they steal a guy out of the state of Alabama. Another out-of-state commitment. That makes 3 defensive linemen in this class. 3 really good defensive linemen in this class. And there's room for more. But I really like this commitment. He's now one of my, I think, 5 favorite commitments they have in this class. I think if I had to say right now, those 5 guys would be Diabell, Jermaine Bishop, Richie Wesley. Uh, who else?
You probably put
was I
Cleveland
thinking
at 4
about?
or 5. What do you think?
Rodney Cleveland, yeah. So Rodney Cleveland, Richie Wesley, Diabell, Jermaine Bishop. And there's one other guy I'm forgetting, but anyways, like he is in that discussion right now. I think he's the best defensive line commit they have. But the bigger discussion here, even bigger than his commitment, is holy shit. Whatever magic potion or whatever spiel that Kenny Baker is giving in these recruiting meetings or on these official visits or when he talks to these recruits as the new defensive line coach hired before last season, I guess last February it would have been, as a guy that was an assistant defensive line coach, not even the main defensive line coach, but an assistant defensive line coach for the Miami Dolphins, and was known as an up-and-coming young coach in the league that might eventually get there to a position coach or maybe even to a coordinator position if he stay in the league long enough. But a guy that Sark saw a lot in, even though he had never, ever had no experience whatsoever recruiting at the college level, but at as high of a level as Texas needs to recruit at the Power 4 level in the SEC, and zero experience, zero skins on the wall doing that kind of thing. But you look at what he's done since he arrived at Texas, and I think what he's accomplished here in the past year and a half, 2 years almost since he was hired. I guess it's a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Because he was hired last winter. You look at what he's accomplished in recruiting, and I think he's almost done as much, if not actually more. I think he's done more in this span of a year and a half than Bo Davis was able to do at Texas from a recruiting standpoint. Now, Bo Davis was an excellent on-the-field coach, an excellent teacher. He has a track record of putting tons of guys into the NFL from his days at Alabama. I'm not knocking Bo Davis as a teacher, as a coach, but as a recruiter at Texas, it just really didn't meet the standards of what Texas is trying to do in recruiting. And Kenny Baker is actually meeting those standards. And the reason why it's surprising is because he has never done this before. So I don't know what he's telling them, what he's showing them. Maybe it's just, hey, look, we put 2 defensive linemen into the NFL this past year or last year with Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, and I just put another 2. I developed Alfred Collins this past year. I developed Vernon Broughton into mid-round NFL draft picks. Come to Texas. I'm gonna develop you as a player, and you're gonna end up being drafted into the NFL. Maybe it's as simple as that, and we'll figure out the NIL money and the revenue sharing later. But I'm very impressed, not only by Sark's ability to spot these coaches. Maybe like Sark, when you think about it, doesn't necessarily like go out and hire the most popular big name that you can think of. Will anyone know who Chris Jackson was before he was hired as the wide receivers coach? Like, did you know who Chris Jackson was? Did you know he was the wide receivers coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars before he was hired by Texas? I didn't. Maybe some people did. Maybe Jaguars fans did, but I didn't. And look what he's done. Look what he did last year. Michael Terry.
Jamie French.
Jamie French, Khalik Locke. Yep. Kenny Baker, though, is even more surprising but good on him. Like Justice Terry. And now, you go out and get a Josiah Sharma in last year's class. And then you go into the portal this past year. And you go get, all these players, Murad Watson from Syracuse, a freshman All-American. You get 5 defensive tackles in the portal to fill that void, and then you continue that momentum into this recruiting class. And you already have three 3 commits. You already have over half your defensive line class committed in the month of June. Very, very impressive stuff by Kenny Baker. He's proven, I think, a lot of people wrong who had doubts about his ability to be a great recruiter at Texas so soon, really, really fast with what he's been able to accomplish. So, and it's kind of the same thing with Alan Clark, the new edge coach. He's, I think, played a big part in a lot of these recruitments as well. And he's a big part of why Richard Wesley committed yesterday. I'll just go ahead and say that right now. So, yeah, that's kind of my spiel on Bodney Cleveland and how it all ties in to Kenny Baker and stuff.
A couple things I'll say on it. I mean, I think Sark knows that with how college football is right now and how much of a, cohesive unit a coaching staff actually has to be, you've got to be very picky about who you bring in. And also, if you go out and get the big name, and then they go do a good job, they're even more likely to just get poached later right on anyway. So I think going for these guys that he believes in but may not have the track record just yet, I mean, it's proving that he has great judgment for one, and also just it's showing that there's the infrastructure there that these coaches can come in and know what they need to do to succeed and get it done.
Mm-hmm. So with all that being said, let's talk about another defensive lineman that visited this past weekend that Texas is really high on, and that is 4-star defensive lineman out of Fort Myers, Florida, Kendall Guerville, who Texas really, really likes. They've come on strong in this recruitment. Texas is looking to take 4, potentially even 5 defensive linemen in this class. Here's what I'll say about Guerville first. He made his visit to Texas in the spring. He really, really enjoyed it. And now he made another visit this past weekend on an official visit. And the intel that I've gathered is that he's now set a commitment date for July 2nd, which is going to be next Wednesday. And Texas is the leader in his recruitment. They're competing with Florida, Georgia, and Florida State for his services, and I feel really, really confident that by this time in about 9 days from now of this recording, Kendall Guerville out of Fort Myers, Florida, will be the 4th defensive tackle commit in this class. So that's some more good news for the Longhorns. Now, of course, things can change between now and then, but as of right now, at the time of this recording, I feel really confident in that one. Let's see, what else do we need to cover here from this weekend? A couple 5-stars we'll touch on, and then we'll move on. Let's talk about Tyler Atkinson. This is a guy who's a 5-star linebacker, pretty much consensus 5-star linebacker by every service. Potentially the best player in the state of Georgia. He's the number 1 or number 2 best player in the state of Georgia. He's from Grayson High School in Loganville, Georgia. The same high school as Nick Brooks, the tackle prospect that Texas had committed last recruiting class, last year, who's now a freshman. And he actually set up this official visit last week. Wasn't sure if he was going to visit Texas, but made the decision to visit Texas.
Uh-oh.
He visits Texas, and this has actually turned into one of the most interesting recruitments, I think, of this entire cycle. But sorry for the technical difficulties, a little internet issue there, but let me get back to what I was saying about Tyler Atkinson, the 5-star linebacker out of Loganville, Georgia, Grayson High School, who took an official visit to Texas. The story here is It's going to be Texas or Georgia. I expect him to make a decision in July sometime, or maybe early August. Texas is also recruiting Xavier Griffin, who's going to commit. I think it's on Saturday or Sunday. It's going to be on Sunday. They might get Xavier Griffin, but they're also going after Tyler Atkinson because they want to get an elite like Anthony Hill level linebacker in this class. They need to do it. Linebacker is a very important position in this recruiting class, given that Anthony Hill leaves after this year, supposedly. If he has the season we all think he's going to have and no injuries happen. The interesting thing about Tyler Atkinson, though, is he's been training in Austin with former UT great linebacker and NFL Hall of Fame linebacker Derek Johnson. He's been training in Austin with Derek Johnson. So that's an interesting part of this recruitment. He really likes Texas, but it's going to be hard to get him out of Georgia. But Texas has done that before. They did it just a couple months ago with Justice Terry. So we'll see what happens there, but that's an interesting one to watch. Let me see if there's any other prospects before we move on to baseball that I want to touch on. Speaking of linebacker, Kosi Okpala. He's not a guy that we've touched on much, but he's a 4-star linebacker out of Mady Creek here in the state of Texas. Texas entered this weekend as the favorite there. They left the weekend as an even bigger favorite there. And I think whether it takes a day, it could be tomorrow, it could be a week from now, it could be 2 weeks from now, that kid's going to end up being a Longhorn. Really good player. Not a super blue chip, I don't think. Not like a Tyler Atkinson or an Anthony Hill, but he's very close to being that. Really good player out of Mady Creek. Texas has been on him for a while. He's got other schools in his recruitment, but I think that guy's going to commit to Texas here very soon. And then I think that's about it. Emmy, do you have any questions?
Heard that Okpala
or anything
before.
else
Is
you
that
want to touch
another
on before we move on?
professional athlete kid?
You might be thinking of Arakpo. I don't think his family.
Gotcha.
I don't think he's got any of that in his blood, but I could be wrong. One more guy I actually need to touch on is John Turntime, who visited this past weekend. His visit was a success. He's a super blue chip tackle out of North Crowley here in the state of Texas. There's high confidence in Austin about where the Longhorns sit. This is going to come down to Texas and Texas A&M. But as of right now, I feel pretty confident about Texas's chances to actually end up with Helix Ojo and John Turntime, which would be incredible. Like, that would be the A-plus offensive line class that we've been looking for. So I think he's going to announce. Turntime actually announces his decision, or he's set to announce his decision on the 4th of July. So that would be next Friday. So about a week and a half from now, Turntime will be making a commitment. And I think if things hold steady, Texas has as good of a shot as anybody to land him, which would be awesome. Anything else?
I looked
Emmy?
up that name.
Anything else?
Okpala, and KZ Okpala is a NBA small forward. That's why I recognize that name. So never mind that thought.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But good news on John Turntime. I feel like will be coming soon. But yeah, that's those are the big names. Most of the big names I think we need to touch on for today. We touched on Richard Wesley. We touched on Fodney Cleveland, the new defensive tackle commit. We touched on Kenny Baker, the impact he's had on the program. We touched on Dia Bell. We touched on a lot of the big names that visited this past weekend. So with all that being
Yeah,
said,
sounds good.
I think we can move on to baseball. Does that sound good to you? All right. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start with Texas baseball? I think we start with this question. What, in like a couple short sentences, how would you assess the overall
In two
2025
sentences, I
Texas
think
baseball season?
it's a step in the right direction, but had a very disappointing ending with a variety of different factors involved in the disappointing ending. Not all of them are just like the fault of the players. Like injuries played a role. Just general momentum is just a thing in baseball. They played some hot teams down the stretch. So I think they're definitely on the right track, and there's a lot of positives to take for sure.
That's very similar to how I'd sum it up. I would say it was a super successful regular season where I think the level of talent on the 2025
100%.
Texas Longhorns baseball team, Texas overachieved in their first year in the SEC, starting out 19-2, winning the regular season. I think it's safe to say that looking back on things, they
Right.
probably played above their talent level for much of the season, and just didn't end up being necessarily the hottest at the right time, which matters a lot in baseball. You say it all the time. So, very successful regular season. A lot of promise for the program looking ahead, especially with what they're already doing in the portal. But it did have a very disappointing end. And at the end of the day, even though it was year one, and we're all putting our trust in this coaching staff, their ability to recruit. We all think that was probably the least talented roster that Texas baseball will have for the foreseeable future under Jim Schlossnagle. And I think that's right, like 100% right. But the standard at Texas is not to make a regional and get knocked out. The standard at Texas is to get to Omaha. And so it was, from that standpoint, a very disappointing end. So with all that being said, let's talk about what Texas is doing so far in the offseason and how it kind of matches up to what our wish list or what our wants were for this team going in. But before we get into the additions, it's important to mention the subtractions, right? And the biggest subtraction happened yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Will Gasparino, the starting center fielder on last year's team and this past year's team, 2 years at Texas, highly recruited out of high school. He was the highest rated recruit in David Pierce's last recruiting class at Texas. Superb defender, a lot of promise with the bat, from the state of California, made his decision to enter the transfer portal yesterday. And the favorite to land him is actually going to be UCLA. UCLA, a really good program. They just were in the College World Series. Here's what I'll say about that, because I know a lot of people like Gasparino, including both of us, and his potential. I think there are a couple factors in play here. Number one, over the last 24 games of this season, he just wasn't good enough at the plate. Now, he has a lot of promise, and he showed it over the first half of the season. Like, he was very good non-conference, the first couple SEC series, hit 4 homers against Missouri. For the first couple weeks of SEC play, you could argue he was the best hitter that Texas had, especially from a power standpoint. but the last half of the season just went into a bad slump. Where over the last 24 games that Texas played, and to be fair, like he was not the only guy in the lineup that wasn't holding up his end of the bargain. That's one of the reasons Texas wasn't able to go as far as they probably wanted to at the end of the day. But in his last 24 games, he had 12 hits total, and 27 strikeouts. Yikes. And so, look, man, he's a player with a lot of promise. He's as good as it gets defensively. I think both sides were just ready for a fresh start. I think Gasparino himself is looking to get back closer to home. Things just didn't really pan out as well as he hoped at Texas. And it's neither side's fault, really. But I think this was, and it's been reported that this was a mutual parting of ways. And Texas has been able to go out and get some really, really elite talent in the portal to replace these guys in the outfield. So that's my little spiel on Gasparino. I wish him the best at his new destination. But I think this was bound to happen after the rough finish to the season and just a combination of factors. Texas going out and getting elite of the elite talent. Gasparino not really being guaranteed a spot next year. Just a lot of things went into it.
Yeah,
and I think it's best for both parties.
For
Any thoughts
one,
on
when
that?
you're that tall, it's so hard to be, in control of the entire, have command over the entire strike zone, the way Aaron Judge does. It's unprecedented. It's not like what Aaron Judge does is not normal. And I think Gasparino is kind of going through those struggles right now.
No.
On the plate. And I think he probably was just as frustrated as anybody. I mean, a 24-game sample of that tough of a road, that's not a small sample size. And he was probably his worst critic within that, and I think maybe the frustration just kind of boiled over. I think I would give him credit in terms of, not putting blame on anybody. I think with it just being a mutual thing, he didn't cause any drama. He didn't, point fingers or anything like that. So, yeah, I wish him the best. Same as you. I think UCLA would probably be a pretty good destination for him, if I were to guess. Maybe Stanford. I don't know what his grades are like, but any of those California teams, really.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the portal action happening with our last couple minutes here. The biggest of which happened today, like a couple hours ago, earlier this afternoon. First team All-American catcher, rising junior, from Notre Dame in the ACC, the second best conference in college baseball. Superstar catcher Carson Tinney, first team All-American this past year at Notre Dame, who entered the portal a couple weeks ago when it opened, announced his commitment to Texas. Why is it important? Well, he's an incredible player, incredible defense, incredibly great offensively at the plate too. And Ryan Galvan, their catcher this past year, is probably entering the draft. He's going to get drafted. He's going to sign with an MLB team here in a couple weeks. So, Texas had a big void to fill at catcher. I didn't think they would be able to upgrade from Ryan Galvan at catcher. But it looks like they did just that. So, incredible job by the staff. And that's not a shot at Ryan Galvan, who was like a second team or third team All-American this year. He was one of the best catchers in college baseball. But Texas may have just gotten the best catcher in college baseball. And what has Schlossnagle said? There's never been a good baseball team without a really damn good catcher. And that's what Texas got. So He's like the white whale of all of these commitments, in my opinion. They also picked up earlier today, maybe Jalen Flores's replacement at shortstop. They had some voids to fill in this lineup, and they went out and got Timo Becerra from Stanford. You just mentioned Stanford. They go out and get Stanford's shortstop from this past year. Um, he's a guy who's kind of similar to Ethan Mendoza last year. He's going to come in and be a guy who's going to put the ball in play a ton. He's a bat to ball kind of guy. Doesn't possess a ton of power, but he's going to provide a consistent bat, I think, towards the bottom of this lineup. And that's not something that we can say about Jalen Flores this past year. He kind of struggled at the plate. And his draft stock isn't nearly as high as it once was. Again, I don't think Timo is going to be like a superstar or anything of that nature, but really solid commitment at shortstop. But those are the two commitments that happened today, and there's a lot more that we can go over. But Emmy, do you want to
Well,
mention anything on the portal side
a few
that
things.
has stood
I
out to
think
you?
the actual amount of commitments that have happened has been pretty telling. The amount of attrition that this roster is going to be going through. There's going to be a lot of new blood on this roster, and just in a year plus a few weeks, Schlossnagle has seemingly just completely flipped this entire roster. There's not a whole lot of guys from from the Pierce era left on this roster, and that's probably for the best. I think
Pierce.
he's bringing his crop in, the guys that are gonna obviously perform how he wants them to, but also fit into what he wants to do from a defensive standpoint, from a pitching standpoint. Guys that what's it? Max Weiner believes in and can coach up as well.
Max Weiner. Yeah, those two guys that committed today aren't the only two big time names that have committed. A couple other names you guys should know. Again, we'll go deeper into these players sooner rather than later. We have a bunch of time to talk about these players throughout the offseason. But Aiden Robbins, if I had to pinpoint a guy who's the biggest commitment Texas has received so far outside of Carson Tenney, the Notre Dame catcher, it would be Aiden Robbins, who's an outfielder commitment from Seton Hall. He was the Big East Player of the Year last year, first team All Big East selection. He hit .422 with 38 RBIs, 44 walks, and 20 stolen bases. And he plays really good defense in the outfield. If you're looking for, I'll say this, if you're looking for Will Gasparino's replacement in center field, I think it's going to be Aiden Robbins, outfielder from Seton Hall, first team All Big East, first team All Conference selection, one of the best hitters in college baseball. Moving his way up from Big East to SEC play, that will be a step up. That will be one of the questions, as it always is with these guys. Can they hit SEC pitching? But Aiden Robbins is as good as it gets. And if you're looking for Will Gasparino's replacement in center field, there it is.
One thing I'll add real quick is if you're a great hitter, it's not only just a talent thing, but it's also a mindset thing. If you're a great hitter, you believe you can hit off of anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. So they're bringing the guys in that have not only have a track record, but have the mindset of just absolutely terrorizing pitchers.
Yep, a couple other names. Again, Texas has received 8 commitments so far, 6 bats and 2 pitchers. I don't really see maybe I probably see a couple more guys probably on the pitching side here pretty soon that they'll maybe try to get through the portal. But I mean, a large majority of the work has already been done. Um, this staff has been maniacal in its approach to the portal this year, acquiring high level talent, really trying to upgrade the level of talent on this roster. Jack Maroknek is another name that they got committed. He's another outfielder from Butler, more of a power guy than Aiden Robbins. 372 average, 18 home runs, 57 RBIs, 16 doubles, a 1.145 OPS. Just an amazing, another beast from the Big East. Um, that kid is going to play right field. That kid's the replacement for Max Ballou. So you can kind of see how like the symmetry's matching up here. Like Ballou's going to the draft. They get Jack Maroknek. Gasparino's leaving to the portal. They get Aiden Robbins. Ryan Galvan's leaving to the draft. They get Carson Tinney. They're just filling the gaps, and they're doing it really at a high level. So they've got two other pitchers. We can touch on them here pretty soon once this roster really fills out. There's Josh Livingston, who's a really good player from Wichita State, who I think will end up being either the first baseman or the DH for this team. Another just big, burly power bat that can hit the ball out of the ballpark. They're doing some really impressive stuff in the portal. So it's getting me super excited for next year and the potential of this program moving forward. As we said, we're both very optimistic about where this thing is heading. But we've got a ton of time to dive deeper into their profiles. We just wanted to give an introduction as to like, okay, season ended about a month ago, a couple weeks ago, I guess.
A lot has happened.
What has happened since then?
To put it simply.
Here it is, man. A lot has happened since then. Schlossnagel, Nolan Kane, Troy Tulowitzki, they're working at a rapid pace. They're working 18-hour days to fill out this roster, make it as good as they can make it for next year going into fall ball. So yeah, we'll be diving more into it as more news comes in, but that's kind of where things stand on Texas baseball. So we're right at 1 hour. We actually made really good timing, with this episode as much as we had to talk about. I was worried we might go a little over there for a minute, but I think we touched on all that we really absolutely needed to tonight. So, Emmy, if you had to give one parting shot related to the Texas Longhorns, it could be the football program, the baseball program, basketball program, softball, whatever it might be. What's your parting shot? Like, what is one thing you want to get off your chest, or just one thing you wanted, one thing on your mind regarding Texas?
The one thing I'll say right now is, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't think people realize how good Arch Manning is. I don't think they know yet. And Columbus, Ohio is about to learn. Oh boy, we're gonna have a show. That's gonna be. Oh man, that game. If I end up like, I don't know, if my girlfriend wants to make plans that day, I'm just gonna have to tell her like, hey, like, I'm sorry, like I'm glued to the couch. I can't move. I'm sorry, I can't move.
Well, the good thing for you and your girlfriend is the game's going to happen at 11 a.m. And so you do have the rest of the day after the game to do whatever you want if you want to. But I do get what you're saying there. And yeah, I do agree with you. Like, I don't think people realize what the Arch hype is going to turn into. If you can't stand it already, if you're a fan of OU or A&M or a rival school or a school that just hates Texas, I don't know what to tell you because it's going to get about 100 times louder come August. Um, and the funny thing about you bringing Arch Manning up is this is actually June 23rd. This is actually the
No way.
3-year anniversary of Arch Manning's commitment to Texas. It's amazing, right? Like time's gone by that fast. He committed to Texas the
Jeez.
afternoon of June 23rd of 2022, part of that 2023 recruiting class. And interestingly enough, in internet pundits,
Oh, funny how
he
that
still
works.
hasn't entered the transfer portal. Interesting how that works, isn't it? But my parting shot uh, for tonight is actually really good news on the Texas football front, and that is that C.J. Baxter has been cleared for football activities. He's working out with the team, and he will be part
Okay.
of fall practice when we ramp things up at the end of July. As long as he doesn't do something stupid, that's really good news that came along while I was out of town that I wanted to share with everyone. CJ Baxter is 100% healthy, ready to go. We'll see how he looks in full pads when we get there, um, you know, later in July. But as of right now, hearing good things about him and Christian Clark. So both of the guys that were injured last year in fall camp, they look pretty damn good right now. So we'll
Great
see how all
news.
that works out.
Fantastic
But
news.
good news on the Texas running back front as we wrap up tonight's show. And then also I should just say, like, we didn't talk about Jonah Williams much today because he's part of the Texas baseball. He factors into next year's baseball team. But in order to get to baseball, he's got to get through football season healthy, which we're all hoping he absolutely does. But he's also been practicing with. He's already made that transition to football. He's lifting weights, doing all that with the football team, and he looks fantastic. So,
Yeah.
no surprise, just some other news you should keep in the back of your mind. Uh, that's gonna do it tonight, and for this week's episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. On next week's show, we're going to have more recruiting news to talk about. I'm 100% sure of that. That'll continue
Mm-hmm.
to be a consistent theme over the next couple weeks, months. And I think Gimmy's really enjoying it. And we'll also have the NBA draft to talk about. Where does our guy Trey Johnson end up on Wednesday night? What happens with our teams, the Spurs and the Mavs? Um,
Yeah. What do the
are there
Sixers
any
do with the
massive
third
trades
pick?
that go down on Wednesday night? Like we'll be recapping some of these. Exactly. We'll be recapping some of these things next week on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, and we might even talk a little bit about um, the college basketball transfer portal if we have time. But that's going to do it for tonight. We have another bonus NBA season recap coming out later this week along with this episode. But
Peace.
until then and until next week, hook 'em horns and peace out.